All right, welcome back to another edition of the Writers Chat series. I'm here with Dr. Elena Bayer, and she's going to be kind of the host, I guess, and I'm going to be the guest discussing about the topic at hand. So the title of today's session is Step by Step, Ooh Baby. It's really about the idea of how do we walk through creating a great storyboard so we can write better. And so that's kind of the topic.
Thanks, Teresa. And so I'm going to invite everyone, if you have any thoughts as we're going through our discussion today, please put your thoughts into the chat. I'm going to monitor that as well. And think about things that are tips or strategies that you use or things that you might struggle with. And so to get us started, Teresa, I know you've got some strategies yourself in getting started with writing. You're a prolific writer, and encourage many of us to write more and more often. And so can you start off with sharing, I guess, how do you get started for your outlines, storyboards, and flow?
I would say that the first thing that I do is that I have a template that I will share with all of you. And this template is, honestly, isn't not have to start with a blank page, because I think every writer's worst enemy is a flashing cursor on a blank Word document, Google document, whatever you're using. And so I'm going to put a link in the chat, and it's to a post that our postdoc fellow Yusuf Yilmaz actually created. And at the very bottom, he has a link that says Google Docs template for a quick start. So I'm going to actually screen share that screen so you can see. And when you click the link, you'll go to this link here. And then if you just scroll down to the very bottom, there's this right here. He also goes through other steps that you can do to up your game in terms of collaborative writing. But what's nice about it is it takes you to a really nice template that you can bookmark. And you don't need to request edit. You can just actually file and actually make a copy if you're logged into your Gmail, or you can actually download a copy. And so what I've taken to actually is just making a copy so that I can get all my authors kind of on the same page. And what this does is it systematizes some of the boring stuff that when you're running your first article, you actually don't realize that you need all this information from everyone at the end. And then often after you've done all of this work and you're ready to submit, and then you get going through the editorial managers, you're like, I don't have everyone's phone number. Everyone's phone number, and I don't have everyone's email, and I don't know if this person is in which department, and all of a sudden this systematizes that data collection actually at the very beginning before you even have other words on the page. We've also outlined all the common kind of elements that often journals really like, and so that's nice as well. And then we just have these headings. And what's nice about it is that if you actually hit this little button up here in Google Docs, you can see it's already all organized for you. So you can jump around. So you can kind of like, and that's a different 80s song, jump around. No, just kidding. But that you can actually jump through to the different sections, and it's really nice and organized. So it's nice for you to actually have a copy of this so that you can use this as your template to get started. Because no longer are you starting with a blank page. You're starting with kind of a template. And I think that that is really powerful for a first step.
I love that idea of the template to get started. And I know on an article that I'm just starting on, I did a copy of that template. And just that momentum of being able to put in the author information, I felt like I had something on a page. And it wasn't the blank page. So, I haven't got, and then I was able to even just start putting in some bullet point ideas,
exactly,
in the different sections, because the section headers were there. So I didn't have to worry yet about fleshing out the idea, but I had a brain dump space that was somewhat organized to start with. And all of a sudden you can start to see it take shape a little bit. And then that creates some momentum for you.
And so for those of you who are organized and can think linearly, I love you, and you will love just doing the template and going for it. I have a beautiful but disorganized mind, like Elena has confessed. And my favorite tool for getting me on page is actually sticky notes, because what I do is I brain dump. And you can use the big sticky notes like this, or you can use the little tiny ones that you normally see, the squares, whichever you like. I like bigger ones for papers because I find I need to write a whole sentence, not just like 2 words, right? And so what I actually do is I write the thoughts that I have about the paper. Like I write one sticky note for, let's say Heather wrote a paper that is exactly the paper that I need. And maybe there's one that's close enough that Eva or Cynthia written, and I'll just actually write down your name and then the PubMed ID and the title of the paper. I'll just brain dump that stuff. I will literally write probably 24 sticky notes, and it won't make a lot of sense yet, because what I do is kind of like put all the thoughts on down into a pile of sticky notes. And then what I do is I get a separate color sticky note, because that's my mind works that way. And I put the headings just like you do in the paper, and I put them on a big table or the wall. And then what I do is I organize the thinking that I have. Like, so I put like intro, and I'll put like sticky, 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 sticky. And I'll put methods, sticky, 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 sticky. And I'll move them around until it makes sense to me. And I find that that's a really inclusive way as well. If you have junior authors, if you have other people, it's reminiscent of, I was kind of obsessed with like movie making and like animated movies when I was a kid. I think most people are, they love Disney, right? And so I was reading about how in Pixar, and that was no longer when I was a kid, that was probably when I was a teenager. You're watching, how did they get so many people on the same page to understand how they would find Nemo? Well, they do that because they have all the writers in the room, and they sketch out, like here's Dory, and here's, Melvin, and here's Nemo, and this is what's going to go on. And so what you can do with your whole team when you're writing, especially if you're doing collaborative writing, is that you can actually bring everyone together to make sure the storyline is coherent. And I have found that it's almost like a liberating structure, right? Like, in leadership, they talk about inclusive kind of leadership practices. And if you ever checked out the liberatingstructures.org, I think, website, you should definitely check it out. There's different ways and tools that you can do to kind of jazz up your meetings. But similarly here, writing often is a very lonely process. And I am a very extroverted person, so it doesn't work for me. But bringing in practices like having a jam session with sticky notes. And during pandemic days, what I've been using is something called Google Jamboard, which is roughly the same thing. How many of you know what Google Jamboard is? Thumbs up, hands up. Okay, I'm going to show some of you, because if not everyone knows what it is, then it is worth knowing. So if you just go to jamboard.google.com, it's that simple, as long as you're logged into your Gmail account. And it literally is a sticky note platform on Google, and it's like mind-blowing. And so I'm going to invite you all. I'm going to just open this up for you, and then all of you can help me jam on, let's say, and then anyone can edit. Okay. So what I'm going to do is, now I can title the Jamboard. I'm going to call this Writers Chat. Let's say we're going to write a paper, the Writers Chat. No, I'm not saying that we should, but I'm just saying, let's say we're gonna, right? And let's say I want to use all these headings here. Copy them over, and I can paste them over in text, or you can, just do this and then paste it in. You're like, maybe that's too much. So you might just put introduction. And when you do that, it like actually shows up as a yellow sticky note, which is kind of cool. And then you could, brain dump and things like that. So I'm going to give you guys the link in the chat so you can see it. All right. And you can try hopping on. And so what you can do is you can actually organize, just like I did. If I was actually doing it with real sticky notes, I would say introduction, methods. You could do discussion, limitations, conclusions, and then results. Okay. All right. So these are the headings that usually exist in a paper. So I'll put them in order. Like I said, I don't always think linearly, because the limitation is part of that. Conclusions and results. Okay. So that's basically what I usually do on a wall or on a table or something like that to organize myself. And then, you might say, okay, so now I'm going to change sticky note colors. And so all of you can actually try this. If you're online right now, what you'll be able to do is click this little button yourself. And so you might want to brain dump some ideas for what you put in the introduction. So you could write a sticky and say, why writing is hard. something like that. Okay. Maybe I'll, in the discussion, talk about how this chat series made writing easier, right? You might want to say, like, let's say we did a survey of all of you all, survey development, that might be something we need, right? Importance of music might be something. Again, these are not in any order of anything. And you can say music, right? Et cetera, et cetera. And so now we have all of these things, how it's fun. Okay, great. So now we have to put them under the section that we think it would be, right? How to make, so edit that, make it green, and boom, right? And so that's probably the hook, right? How to make writing is hard. Maybe this is like the problem. The gap might be, you might need to actually say gap equals not a lot of proven techniques that help with getting people writing. And so you have that thought, problem. We have a problem now, we have a gap, and then now you can start organizing yourself, which I think is kind of cool. And methods include maybe some collaborative writing, and this is probably like we'll tell the story of the chat. You might in the methods need to talk about survey development and some kind of evaluation. You might want to double back in the discussion about the importance of the music. And as you can see here, we're starting to formulate a plan, right? The next step after this is that I actually just rewrite all of these sticky notes in the order, like 1, 2, 3, 4, onto a template. So I would actually go into here and I would actually write down, the bullet points for the problem gap hook right into the template. So that's kind of like it's really step by step, right? Like it's like it's a cookbook technique that I think helps me ritualize some parts of the writing process, because I actually do find that part rather fun, but sometimes not always organized. And so this is a way to get into the fun, because I find Sharpies and sticky notes fun. And then it helps me organize my thinking around that.
Yeah, and that's great. And so Teresa and I were independently thinking about sort of different tips and strategies. And looking back at the notes that I had made prior to coming to the session, I had the same idea of the cue cards and the stickies. And, the Jamboard is one option for doing it digitally. PowerPoint or slide presentations could be another way, where you use the slide to capture your main point and then put additional notes or links to articles in the notes pages. So lots of different tools, or hard copy. I mean, I'm in my virtual screen, but I have my Post-it notes beside me all the time. That's my favorite back to school shopping, is buying all my different colored Post-it notes at the start of the school year. And I think one strategy I would suggest when you're doing your Post-its is really to keep it to one idea per Post-it or per card. And you can translate this. I do a lot more sort of lecture teaching right now than writing, but I take that same approach with my slides, kind of the one idea per slide. And so it's all about telling that story. And I've even done this with my slide presentations, where I've actually cut up my PowerPoint deck and put the different slides on the paper version of it onto a table, and then rearranged the different slides to look at different ways I could tell that same story. And so I love the idea, whether it's a presentation or on the Jamboard, that you can move your ideas around to look at how best does that story come out, and where are the common threads, and keeping those ideas kind of in a flow. Because I find that that's one of the things I read in a lot of papers, the struggle with is the flow. You start on one tangent and then somewhere the paper's gone off, and we're not really sure what that main point was anymore. So how do you kind of get back to it? So that can help you start to see those linkages.
Yeah, and I find that the storyboarding process, it really forces you to be like, okay, how do I connect these stickies? It actually makes you make another sticky to connect the dots. You kind of saw me do that earlier, because I was like, okay, well, we have a problem. We don't have a gap statement, and now we have a hook. And then we have a how we did this, right? And so each of those things, you're like, oh, and then so you shift it apart, you make a new sticky and you put it in, right? Or a virtual sticky if you're using Jamboard. So I do think that that's a great way to really check your logic, because then you're like, okay, does this make sense? to a new reader. And that's where I think that when you're working as a team, especially, then it gets everyone on the same page. It gets everyone to think about, okay, does this paper actually make sense? And then that actually helps you set you up nicely for if you do try to do collaborative writing, then everybody has a strat plan for the entire paper and knows where we're going to go with it. And then you can divide out, these two people are like Alana, you and Jason are going to work on, the methods, and I will work on the introduction, and then Mary will take care of the discussion, and Kuldeep is going to write the conclusion and make the tables, right? And so we could actually divide and conquer a little bit better, just like the Pixar animation studio artists, and like there's thousands of people working on a Pixar movie, but they know the strat plan. They know how Nemo gets found in the end. And because everyone's on side with that, then every little piece where they're working on this part of the animation or that part of the animation, they know how it's all going to flow together. And that's really key.